Hello and welcome to the eOrganic webinar on the performance of organic treatments in long-term system trials, organic benefits and challenges in the face of climate change. My name is Alice Formiga and I'm the webinar coordinator for eOrganic. eOrganic is the organic agriculture community of practice with eExtension. You can find all of our published articles, videos, and our many upcoming and recorded webinars on organic farming and research topics on our website at extension.org/organic_production. I'd like to introduce today's speaker, Dr. Erin Silva. Dr. Silva is the organic production scientist and the associate director of the Center for Integrated Agricultural Systems at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. Her research and outreach program focuses on no-till organic production, cost of production determination for diversified vegetable growers, and variety selection for organic growers.
Today I'm going to talk about the performance of organic farming systems in long-term systems trials and talk about the impacts of those results on the role of organic farming in the face of climate change. Myself and Janet Hedke, who had been working on the long-term system trial here at the University of Wisconsin, put this set of slides, this presentation together. But I should acknowledge Josh Posner. Josh Posner was a professor in the Department of Agronomy for many years, had a great history in international agriculture as well as organic agriculture, really one of the pioneers looking at organic agricultural research here in Wisconsin, as well as across the upper Midwest and across the U.S. And unfortunately, Dr. Posner passed away last April and was a big loss to both the University of Wisconsin and the agricultural community here in Wisconsin. So I do want to acknowledge Josh, as this was really his baby and his project from the inception back in 1989. So here's an overview of our long-term cropping systems trial here at the University of Wisconsin, the Wisconsin Integrated Cropping Systems Trial, or what we affectionately refer to as WICST. WICST, again, has been working since about 1989, so is in a good over 20 years now that this trial has been in operation. It's at our Arlington Research Station, which is located in the south central part of the state, just about 30 minutes from Madison in Dane County, and is on one of the best pieces of ag land in the state. Incredibly rich, fertile soils, really some of the best cropland that we have in Wisconsin. Wisconsin, just to give a little bit of background in terms of Wisconsin and where it places nationally with respect to organic agriculture, Wisconsin's organics in our organic community has one of the strongest showings when we're looking at national rankings. Wisconsin ranks #1 in our nation in terms of total organic livestock, #1 for total field crop acreage, #1 for total organic milk cows, and has 22% of the USA total in terms of milk cow numbers. Ranks #2 in organic milk sales with 64% of the organic sales, in part due to the presence of Organic Valley here in the state. We're #2 in terms of the total number of organic farms. Depending on where you're sourcing your numbers from, we get anywhere from about 1,100 to 1,400 organic farms, which is second only to California. And we're #10 in terms of vegetable acreage. And really, our organic dairy and livestock farms drive the market for organic feed, and the systems, having a very diversified agricultural landscape here in Wisconsin, our agronomic farms and our dairy and livestock farms are quite interrelated and quite dependent on each other in terms of both driving the markets and in terms of fertility inputs. So as I mentioned, WICST was born in 1989, really again the brainchild of Dr. Josh Posner. And when it was originally set up, it was set up in 2 locations in Wisconsin. In Arlington, which I mentioned, some of the best ag land here in the state, has well-drained silt loam soils. And there was originally a second location that was set up in Lakeland, which represented a more poorly drained silt loam soil, probably more representative, honestly, to a lot of the organic farms in Wisconsin. Um, and offered kind of a counterpoint to our really prime Arlington site. We've been able to collect 20 years of data, and 20 years of data has been summarized from 1992 to 2012. And over that time period, looking at multiple phases of the rotation, we're really starting to see some interesting trends to emerge, including trends involving economics, soil carbon, yield, and also with the weed seed bank. To explain a little bit about how these rotations are set up, there's 2 different sets of rotations, I guess you could say, as part of the experiment. The first 3 are set up to encompass what we would refer to as our cash grain systems. So there are 2 that are managed conventionally. The first one is essentially a continuous corn operation. So just the only crop within the rotation being corn. The second is a strip-till corn-soybean rotation, which is perhaps more representative of what our conventional farming community would be, how they would be operating here in Wisconsin. And the third of our cash grain systems is organic grain. And this consists of a rotation including corn, soybean, and a winter wheat interseeded with red clover following the soybean. The second set of treatments within this trial are our dairy or forage-based systems. So these are really responding to the strength of our dairy and livestock communities here in the state. So the first of this set of rotations is a conventional alfalfa rotation, where we do have corn within 1 year of the rotation, but the other 3 years of the rotation are 3 years of alfalfa. We have then an organic forage rotation, which is a bit more diversified, and that includes 1 year of corn, then an oat pea alfalfa mix, followed by a second year of alfalfa. And then the final treatment within this system is essentially a managed grazing system, where we have continuous pasture that is rotationally grazed with either some sort of livestock or dairy cows. The first set of data that I'd like to highlight is looking at the effect of weed pressure on corn yield, which really ties into years where we have wet springs. And in the past 6 or so years, about half of them we've experienced unusually wet springs. And you can really see here through this data set the impact of those unusually wet springs on organic production. In wet springs, for instance, these are years where our May and June precipitation is equaled greater than 10 inches of rain, ARS referring to our Arlington site, again with those prime soils, versus LAC, the Lakeland site, which has more of those subprime soils, I guess, as soils more representative of many of the organic farms in the state. You can see here that the yields, looking at the comparison of conventional yields off those sites versus the organic yields, the conventional yields versus the organic yields 72% to 76% of what the conventional yields would be, versus in a normal spring, where essentially the conventional yields and the organic yields are the same. They're not significantly different, with organic being slightly below the conventional, but essentially yielding 96 to 94% of the conventional crop. What this really highlights is the pressure that organic farmers are under to maintain timely and effective weed control early on in the growing season. And with exceptionally wet springs and some of the flooding events that we've seen over the past couple years, if organic farmers aren't able to get out in the spring to manage the weeds through tine weeding, rotary hoeing, field cultivation, other tools that they might have available to them for mechanical cultivation, it greatly impacts the yield potential of those organic fields. So highlighting the impact of some of the more recent extreme weather events on our organic yield potential and our management. Similarly, these are with soybean yields versus the previous slides looking at corn yields. We see here again in the wet springs, the soybean, organic soybean as compared to the conventional soybean, yielding 79 to 76% of the conventional, versus in a normal spring where timely weed management is a possibility due to the fact that the precipitation is more spread out over the course of the season and the farmer is able to enter the field more in a timely manner. We really have essentially equivalent yields between our conventional and organic systems. So again, highlighting that the impact of those extreme weather events in the spring and how that influences the yield potential of organic systems. Some of the tools that have been used in the WICST trial to manage organically are weeds. We see here a field cultivator, rotary hoe, and then a tine weeder. And really, as the organic system is matured within the WICST trial, we found that the tine weeder has been especially necessary to make sure that we get effective weed management within the systems. Now, with weed management being a challenge in wet yields, wet years, we also see that in general, the organic system does have some resiliency compared to some other conventional management. In 2008, which was a flood year here in Wisconsin, we see that the organic systems highlighted in blue or purple yield comparatively equivalent to our conventional dairy system or our strip-till corn soybean system. The system that is notably challenged within the flood year is our continuous corn system, the far left blue bar. And similarly, in this past season with our 2012 drought, we see some similar results in terms of the performance of these systems in extreme weather events. Again, looking at the performance of continuous corn managed conventionally versus strip-till conventional corn soybean, conventional dairy, organic grain, or organic dairy, the continuous corn suffers. Unfortunately, in the drought year as well, the organic grain system did not yield as well as some of the other systems as well. What we do see is that the systems with a longer perennial phase or less tillage are really the systems that do perform optimally in drought years. So the organic dairy system, where we have those that longer period of alfalfa, or if we see the conventional dairy system or the strip-till corn soybean system, again with those longer forage phases or the minimal tillage, those are the systems that offer more advantage in those drier years. So looking more at the perenniality or the lessening of tillage within those systems and that providing resiliency versus the organic management itself. I do want to highlight, though, that the Rodale Institute similarly looked at the performance of organic systems in drier years. And in this photograph, not quite great resolution in this particular slide, but there's corn on the left-hand side of this photograph versus conventional corn on the right-hand side of this photograph. And this photograph was taken 6 weeks after planting during the 1995 drought. And the conventional corn on the right-hand side is much more showing signs of water stress than the organic corn on the left-hand side of this photograph. When those yields were finally taken at the end of the season during that particular year, Rodale found that the organic corn yields were 31% higher than conventional in that year of the drought. So depending on your source and the management of that organic plot, organic does have the potential to have comparable or higher yields in drought years. But again, it's looking at more of some of the overall management strategies, perhaps including more perennial phases within that overall rotation, as well as building up a soil organic matter through more intensive cover cropping that is helping with the resiliency of those systems. And again, that in part is what was helping the conventional treatments in the WICST trial with the minimization of tillage and the forage phases of the rotation. Looking at some yield trends over the past 8 cycles of the WICST trial. The blue line indicating yield trends of conventional corn versus the red line indicating organic corn yield trends taken from the 3-year grain system. We see on the horizontal axis here, each cycle is 3 years. Thus, the 7-year cycle indicated here covers 21 years of data from 1992 to 2012. On the vertical axis here, there's corn yield at standard moisture in bushels per acre. And each of these data points is the mean of 12 observations with 3 years with 4 reps per year. And the continuous corn, which is shown here, is representative of the conventional corn system. But when the data was analyzed, there was no difference between continuous corn and a corn in a corn-soybean rotation. So as you notice, these lines are parallel, which means that both the conventional and organic corn were improving at the same rate in these systems, getting about a 2.6 bushel per acre a year increase in yield over the course of the time that this data was collected in both conventional and organic. There is a significant difference in the height of the lines, with the conventional corn overall having a 27.8 bushel an acre advantage over organic corn. But this really highlights some of the importance of collecting long-term trial data, because in cycles 2 and 3, it appeared that the here, where these 2 points are close together, it appears that the continuous corn was falling to meet the other treatments, and the organic system was rising to reach the level of what the conventional system was indicating. But then it appeared in cycle 5 that the organic system was declining while the conventional system was increasing. But when you look overall at the trends over the course of 7 cycles, you see that really they're increasing at the same pace. So even with each of these dots representing a 3-year cycle, you can see that within a 3-year period, even if you took any of these in isolation, it would tell you a different story versus looking at this over a 21-year period. So similarly here, looking at conventional or organic corn yield trends, same as the previous graph with the horizontal axis with each cycle lasting 3 years versus the 7-year cycle covering 21 years from 1992 to 2012. And the vertical axis also being the same with corn yields bushel per acre at a standard moisture. And again, each of these data points is the mean of 12 observations over 3 years versus with 4 reps per year. And this time there's no difference in the trend between conventional and organic corn, and both were improving at the same rate of 2.5 bushel per acre a year. And again, looking at the importance of long-term trial data, as we see here in differences in cycle 2, appearing that the conventional corn system is increasing and the organic system is decreasing. But in the end, really we're looking at the same rate of yield increase overall in both of the systems. Looking now at soybean yields, a bit of a different story. This is again covering a period of about 23 years, and each cycle is 6 years long in this case, with the lowest common cycle for 2-phase corn-soybean rotation conventionally and 3-phase for an organic corn-soybean rotation. The vertical axis has soybean yield in standard moisture per bushels per acre, and the horizontal axis is the cycle. And each data point is the mean of 24 observations in cycles 1 through 3, with 6 years with 4 reps per year and 20 observations in cycle 4. There is a significant difference in the curvature of the soybean yield trends for these systems. They both started out averaging about 50 bushel an acre in the first 6 years, But in the next 2 cycles, the conventional system improved by 5 bushel an acre, while the soybean system dropped by about 5 bushel an acre. However, in the last 5 years, they both yielded about 55 bushel an acre, and thus the increased productivity of soybean over the 23-year period has been less than 1% per year compared to about 2% a year for corn, in part perhaps due to some of the improved genetics of the corn varieties versus the soybean varieties. And again, this highlights the importance of looking at long-term trial data, as it's hard to see from data from any one of these cycle periods what really the overall trends of these systems are, even if we're looking at this time at a 6-year cycle. Conventional versus organic alfalfa, we're really seeing not a whole lot happening within these two systems. The horizontal axis here is covering 22 years from 1991 to 2012. Cycle 1 is summarizes 12 years with the lowest common cycle for the 4-phase conventional alfalfa and the 3-phase organic forage rotation. And cycle 2 contains 10 years worth of data, with the vertical axis being alfalfa yield as tons of dry matter per acre. And the yields were only from the first year after establishment. Each data point in cycle 1 is the mean of 48 observations, and in cycle 2 is 40 observations. And there was a significant difference in yield trends for these two systems. The organic system overall did better than the conventional system in the first cycle, but the opposite was true for the second cycle. And again, highlighting the importance of the long-term data and seeing what the trends are overall after a greater period of time. Looking at the economic performance of the systems, through the analyses that have been performed on the WICST data, base gross margins have been calculated, with the gross margins equaling crop revenue minus the variable cost. So in order to calculate this information, the grain was priced at harvest and the hay was priced in the winter. These calculations did include government payments and also included the organic premiums for feed grade grain. The systems were also scaled to farm size in order to account for what would be the typical machinery and level of mechanization for the farms. So here in the upper Midwest, that would be typically about 1,200 acres for a conventional grain farm, 600 acres for an organic grain farm, and about 150 acres of conventional organic forage farms. So looking at the historic grain gross margins of these grain systems, and we're going to look at again the two different systems, the Arlington, which has the very fertile soils, and the Lakeland site, which operated until 2002, so only over a 10-year period, but represents more of what the yield potential and economics would be on some of the less fertile soils here in Wisconsin. So looking at the conventional minimal till corn and soybean system versus the organic grain system, the corn, soybean, wheat rotation, the blue part of the bar represents the base gross margin, the red part of the bar represents the government payment, and the green part of the bar represents the organic premium, with the vertical axis being dollars per acre. As you can see here, whereas the conventional minimal till corn and soybean rotation averaged about $230 per acre over the period from 1992 to 2009, with the organic premium, the organic system reached about $375 per acre. So the organic system being quite a bit more profitable, even with the slight decrease in yield versus the organic system. And these would be more equivalent here. That was just representing with the without the organic premium, the slight reduction in yield with the organic systems. In the Lakeland site, a similar story, really looking at the blue portion of the bar and the red portion of the bar, and looking at what really the yield comparison of the two systems would bring, fairly similar in terms of the profitability per acre, but taking the organic premium into account, the organic grain system is a more profitable system than the conventional minimal till corn soybean system. Looking at those forage-based systems, the second half of the plan at the WICST trial, again, breaking it up between the Arlington site and the Lakeland site, looking at conventional forage versus the organic forage system. Here you see even a more similarity in terms of the dollar per acre for each of these systems based more on yield alone versus with the organic premium, the organic forage system bringing in a significantly higher dollar per acre than the conventional forage system. So conventional forage bringing in about $225 per acre versus the organic forage system at Arlington at about $325 per acre. Similarly, at Lakeland, we have, again, fairly similar yields in the two systems, but with the organic premium on top of that, the organic coming out significantly higher in terms of the overall dollar per acre of the system. Looking at corn and soybean feed price trends at harvest, I'm looking at dollars per bushel. We see that the price of soybean has increased from 1996 to 2012 on the conventional market, but those price premiums in organic have held steady, with the premiums actually quite a bit higher in organic systems in the past couple years in recent history. So organic premiums seem to be holding steady versus the conventional prices, even though the conventional prices have continued to rise over the latter half of the past decade and the early part of the present decade. Similarly with corn systems, conventional corn the prices have risen since about the middle part of the last decade, and whereas organic corn prices have tended to be quite variable, and in 2010 conventional corn prices and organic prices were pretty similar. In the recent history, organic corn has again been able to provide a significant premium to organic producers. Looking at fertilizer cost in the corn phase at the Arlington site in terms of dollars per acre, looking at the price of organic fertilizer versus the price of conventional fertilizer in the blue line, the PEPS price is the price that was, this price is a price that's been collected through a program here in Wisconsin called Profits Through Efficient Production Systems. And this is essentially a contest that UW Extension holds where the most progressive farmers compete and they share information with respect to yields and management of their systems. So that reflects what the prices are from those farmers that were competing in this PEPS contest. But we see that overall in both the conventional and organic systems, as managed at the Arlington site, the fertilizer cost has increased, particularly since the middle part of the last decade, with conventional fertilizer prices increasing, but also the price of organic fertilizer increasing too, again, particularly with the system at Arlington. And this is interesting in terms of how it reflects information collected off of a long-term system trial, particularly with organic management. And what this is showing at Arlington is that the importance of fertility management, particularly nitrogen management, but overall fertility management in organic systems. The way that the cash grain rotation had been originally set up at Arlington was to look at a rotation that would be separate from the livestock operation. So it was not incorporating manure as part of the management scheme, and really was relying on that clover as an input to supply nitrogen to the subsequent corn crop. But really what we're seeing is that there's an exhausting of that fertility at about 7 years into organic management. And at that time, there did have to be outside fertility inputs brought in this case in the form of composted chicken manure. And that is what's responsible for that market increase in conventional or in organic fertilizer cost at that time. So it does, within this time frame of looking at the impact of organic management and looking at the impact of rotation, learning that we really do need to incorporate either other fertility inputs or some other cover cropping strategy that would potentially add in more fertility to the system. And this information may not have been captured in a shorter 3 to 4 year research study. Looking at corn seeding costs at the Arlington site in terms of dollars per acre of both conventional and organic, as well as, again, that PEP study looking at the prices that were found in these competing farmers' operations. We find that in both conventional and organic systems that seed costs has increased, particularly in conventional systems. Price of corn seed has increased dramatically from the latter part of the last decade, but organic corn prices, corn seed prices have increased as well and have impacted the economics of both systems. Similarly, soybean seed costs at Arlington in terms of both conventional and organic. We see here that particularly in the conventional systems, the cost of soybean seed has increased markedly from the middle part of the last decade. And organic soybean seed costs have remained fairly steady, but have increased in the past couple years or so, again affecting the overall economics of both of the systems. Looking at the total expense in the grain systems at Arlington, we see here that the graph here starts at 2000. We see a similar, however, it starts at 2000, but actually there were similar data that were collected through the 1990s that just aren't shown on this graph for the interest of brevity. But interesting that in 2007, 8, or 9, we have nearly the same costs and inputs between the conventional system and the organic system in this graph. And this, again, was primarily due to that increase in fertilizer costs in the organic system due to the fact that we are needing to bring in additional inputs, both potassium and composted chicken manure for nitrogen input. And in addition, what we're seeing during this time frame is the additional need for more weed management, which is adding in part to more expense in the organic system. So again, highlighting some of the phenomenon that we might be seeing in more mature organic systems and highlighting the role of longer-term trials, particularly in organic, to learn more about the dynamics of the system and some of the longer-term issues. Not only at the 7-year mark are we starting to see some issues with nutrient management with the particular rotation that was used to set up the organic trial in the WICST trial, but we're also seeing issues with weeds start to build up and the need to do more intensive weed management over that time period. And that's something that we do hear anecdotally from some organic farmers, is that after the organic system starts to mature and go through a couple cycles of the rotation, that certain weeds do become more problematic and more aggressive management may need to be done on those fields to be able to maintain adequate levels of weed management that won't impact yields. Looking at total expense in forage systems, here the black line indicating conventional forage and the blue line indicating the rotation representative of an organic dairy system with corn, oats, peas, alfalfa, and then the alfalfa year. We find here that the organic costs exceed conventional, mainly due to the fact that in the later years, again, we've had to add more expensive potassium fertilizer. In 2005, there's also a blip in organic due to the fact that there had to have been some reseeding of the oat alfalfa portion of the rotation. And again, there had to have been more extensive weed management in the corn phase of the rotation, more frequent cultivations, tine weeding, et cetera, because of some of the buildup in the weeds over the course of the 7 to 8 years that this particular system has been in management. Looking at gross margins, and these are broken up into two different sectors because there were quite different dynamics from the early part of the last decade and the latter part of the last decade into this present decade. So looking at the gross margins in the 2000 decades at Arlington, the vertical axis being dollars per acre, what we're finding is that the 2002 to 2006, for both the conventional and the organic system managed at Arlington, this was the era of cheap fertilizer and $2 an acre corn. So cheap corn prices and also cheap fertilizer. But there's quite a shift in the latter part of the last decade where we're seeing an era where fertilizer and fuel prices tripled. Also, because of the energy costs, corn drying costs skyrocketed, and we needed more maintenance fertilizer, particularly in the organic system, as well as the conventional fertilizer prices increasing. We're also seeing a higher price for conventional corn in this. However, when we're looking at the overall performance of both organic and conventional, with the purple and the light blue lines being the organic systems and the dark blue, red, and green lines being the conventional systems, even though those two parts of that last decade were quite different with the input prices as well as the grain prices, we're still seeing organic to be the more profitable systems despite the fact of those different dynamics. Looking at soil organic carbon changes over 20 years at Arlington, we see here on the vertical axis loss of tons of carbon in a 3-foot profile. So unfortunately, in all the systems, you see these negative values. So in any sort of ag management at Arlington, we are seeing soil carbon loss. However, in this graph, we can see that there's particularly a lot of loss in the conventional continuous corn system. Here on the far right side, we see the pasture system, the managed grazing system, and in this system, there is a small negative bar, but essentially we're seeing a maintenance of soil carbon. But in all the systems where there is some sort of disturbance to the soil, we are seeing some degree of loss. So in this system, the continuous corn, we are having annual tillage, and we also are having a pretty moderate input of carbon in this system, mostly because we are corn does not have an extensive root system, and any of the carbon that's being contributed is due to above ground crop residue. It's interesting to see, as one of the criticisms of organic is that it's a very tillage intense system, despite the fact that there is a higher degree of tillage with respect to both establishing the crop and weed management. We're really seeing organic maintain the same levels of carbon as a conventional no-till corn-soybean rotation, and we are seeing not significant differences between the alfalfa, conventional alfalfa rotation and the organic alfalfa rotation. So again, in the organic cash grain system, even though we have tillage operations for organic weed management, really not seeing a significant impact of those operations with respect to soil organic carbon. And with the potential integration of some organic no-till phases, really could see additional benefits of overall organic management with some lesser soil disturbance in key phases of the organic rotation. Looking at the soil carbon inputs on the WICST trial, both the Arlington site and the Lakeland site, looking at the systems versus the pounds of carbon per acre that they're contributing, the continuous corn, the soil carbon inputs from the above ground post-harvest crop residue and green manure inputs, roots and root exudates are really what are contributing to these numbers here. And you see the organic forage system is really contributing the greatest amount of soil C inputs versus any of the other systems in this study. Using the NRCS RUSLE2 soil loss estimates, taking it over an 18-year average at Arlington, each of the systems, the conventional continuous corn, conventional no-till corn soybean, organic corn soybean wheat, conventional alfalfa, organic alfalfa, and pastures. It is important to note that all systems are below T, which means that all systems are experiencing a tolerable soil loss of 5 tons per acre. So again, despite the tillage, it's not, assuming a 4% slope, 150-foot runs and contours, the organic system is not exceeding a level that would be of considerable risk. But this does highlight the fact that because organic, with the RUSLE2 soil loss estimates, is performing less optimally than some of the other systems, does highlight that organic could benefit from partial no-till phases. And also adding another year of alfalfa to the organic system, essentially making it a 4-year system, like with a longer alfalfa phase during that, would help reduce soil loss. So highlighting the fact that adding a more multi-year perennial phase of the rotation may be key to looking at more of the long-term sustainability of the organic systems and looking at more of what the long-term benefits of organic could be in terms of maintaining some of the ecological benefits of the system. So the pasture loss that we see here is mainly due to the fact that there was a seeding at the original phase of the study 20 years ago, but overall really negligible soil loss from a pasture system. And it is important to note overall in terms of the management of organic across the organic landscape that pasture is an important component of organic dairies. And even though this wasn't managed organically at the WICST trial, when perhaps looking at the overall impact of the organic farm on the agricultural landscape, because oftentimes pasture is included as part of the management, could offer some of the same perennial benefits as a pasture phase of the rotation. Looking at nitrous oxide emissions per unit of N harvested at Arlington. Here, greenhouse gas data was measured in static chambers, and nitrous oxide is a 300 times more powerful greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. And unfortunately, agriculture is a big contributor to nitrous oxide because of the N inputs, both in terms of inorganic fertilizer, but also in terms of manure fertilizer. And the data shown is a measure of production efficiency with a denominator on an N offtake basis. We see that CS1, which is that conventional continuous corn, is the largest emitter of nitrous oxide because of its large annual N inputs. So because of the amount of conventional mineral fertilizer that's needed in that system, that is is performing the worst in terms of the amount of nitrous oxide that's being emitted. The 3-year organic forage system, here CS5, that emits higher nitrous oxide than the conventional forage CS4 or the pasture system CS6. And this is partially due to the more frequent manure inputs in a 2 to 3 year versus a 2 or the 4 year in the conventional system, and also more frequent tillage in the organic corn phase that contributes to nitrous oxide emissions as well. So there is potential again for some improvement in the organic systems, but looking at the cash grain systems, we see that organic is performing, again, despite the fact that we do have additional tillage operations, is performing comparably to the minimal till conventional corn soybean operation, and is performing better than the continuous corn operation. So looking at some data highlighting carbon and nitrogen changes from other long-term studies, the LTRAS study, the long-term agricultural research study with the Iowa State University, found that total nitrogen in organic systems increased by 33%, and also the organic treatments had higher concentrations of carbon, potassium, phosphorus, magnesium, and calcium. And their results suggest that organic farming can foster greater efficiency of nutrient use and higher potential for sequestering carbon, again, having a positive impact on mitigating climate change. Looking at some data from the Rodale farming systems trial, here they found that in both organic and conventional systems, the highest contribution for overall global greenhouse gas emissions were caused by soil processes fueled by nitrogen fertilizer, compost, and crop residues. So looking at the green portion of the bars, looking at this nitrous oxide emissions, again in organic, because of the input of manure fertilizer, we're still seeing a significant contribution to nitrous oxide emissions. However, particularly again in the if we're looking at a continuous corn operation, we do get significant nitrous oxide emissions due to those conventional mineral fertilizers. And looking at energy inputs in the organic versus conventional systems. And this is data that is very much in line with other long-term studies and other life cycle analyses that have been done at other land-grant universities and universities across the world. That organic system continually is shown to use less energy. And this energy savings is primarily due to the fact that the energy contribution is in the form of conventional fertilizer. So seeing here the megajoule per hectare per year on the vertical axis, organic versus conventional, with the blue portion here of the conventional bar being mineral fertilizer production. It is really that mineral fertilizer contribution that pushes conventional agriculture into being a high energy user. Looking at diesel fuel, because of the reliance of organic on mechanical cultivation, organic tends to use more energy with respect to diesel fuel and equipment. But again, if we can incorporate more no-till phases into the overall organic rotation, this will help improve organic performance with respect to its reliance on diesel fuel. Also, on the conventional side, an energy input is contributed by the use of herbicides, which is absent from the organic system. And just to highlight again, similar results found by another research study. This one was performed in Switzerland, looking at the demand of non-renewable energy sources of the farming systems in their experiment over a 13-year period. Again, finding the D indicating biodynamic system, O indicating organic, and C indicating conventional at 2 different fertilizer rates. Looking at the bricked portion of the bars, the contribution of fertilizer to the overall demand for non-renewable energy in those two systems, it's really that reliance on conventional fertilizers, conventional mineral fertilizers in that conventional system that is having that system being heavily reliant on non-renewable energy sources. Here's some data from a long-term research study in California. Looking at carbon sequestration. There's many treatments here, different rotations managed differently, but what I want to highlight here is the bar on the far right, which is the organic vegetable rotation that includes tomatoes. And what they found is that there is higher degree on their, compared to their farming systems, of carbon sequestration in organic management. So looking at some conclusions, again highlighting both the WICST data as well as the data that's coming off of other long-term trials that include an organic treatment across the nation and across the globe. Looking at organic yields as compared to conventional, organic is typically higher, yielding about 90% or greater than and 90% of conventional, particularly when weeds are controlled. And this number is fairly consistent with other numbers that have been found, particularly in Pennsylvania, Iowa, and in Minnesota, where organic is pretty comparable to conventional yields, again, if weed management is timely, particularly with corn. Organic yields are better than continuous genetically modified corn in extreme weather years. And again, highlighting that really what gives some of the conventional systems or advantage are the ability to incorporate more no-till activities or no-till phases within the rotation, and looking at incorporating more no-till within the organic rotation or minimizing tillage in organic could help organic as well. Organic yields are similar to rotated genetically modified corn in extreme weather years overall, including drought years. And looking at yield trends over the years, corn increased at about 2.5 bushels per acre a year, same for organic and conventional, indicating that there's similar gains in terms of the genetics available to organic and conventional producers, and similar gains in terms of improved production techniques. Soybeans had a slight gain of 0.2 bushel an acre a year, but again indicating the same gain for both organic and conventional, indicating similar gains in terms of both genetics and production. And alfalfa, we're not really seeing any real yield trend yet. Looking at profitability, across all years for the time period that this trial has been in management, organic has continually been proven to be more profitable than conventional. Gross margin has been higher in the last 5 years versus the previous 5 years. A large part of that profitability is coming from strong and steady organic premiums. In this study, organic feed premiums, and that inputs, seed, fuel, and nutrients are driving up expenses, often near the cost of conventional inputs. But again, overall yields are fairly comparable, and those premiums are really maintaining the profitability of organic systems. And then finally, looking at ecosystem services, particularly as they could relate to global climate change. Unfortunately, within the WICST system, all systems are losing carbon other than pasture. But organic is unmuted, despite the fact that there is a heavy reliance on tillage generally for weed management and use of mechanical tools for maintaining adequate maintaining weed management. Organic is maintaining the same level of carbon loss as some of the minimal till conventional systems. And there are some improvements that potentially could be made to the organic system to help mitigate some of this carbon loss, including expanding the rotation with a longer alfalfa phase, and also including no-till phases to the organic rotation. Also, the expansion of the rotation with alfalfa can also help with the mitigation and reduction of soil loss that, again, is in part due to the reliance of organic on mechanical means for weed management. And overall, looking at greenhouse gas emissions, they were lower under rotations, but not necessarily due to organic management, in part due to the fact that manure is a contributor as well as conventional fertilization. So with that, I'll hand it back to Alice and take any questions.
Let's see. What were the differences in management that produced the drought yield differences of your trial versus Rodale?
Excuse me. That's a good question. You know, I don't know if, and this is where unfortunately we don't have that Lakeland site, and I think it may be an artifact of the fact that the Arlington soils are perhaps so good they were able to, even within the conventional portion of the trial, able to act as more of a buffer even in those conventional treatments, where perhaps the Rodale sites were more similar to the Lakeland sites in terms of, I know that Rodale, their organic treatments over their very long-term organic management, they've really build incredible health into the soil within their organic treatments, but perhaps the conventional treatments that did not benefit from that additional soil building throughout the organic years, that's where you saw the difference. I mean, Arlington is just so, the soils are just so incredibly rich there that even trying to do some fertility research, finding the right plots for that can be challenging, because even adding no input, they perform quite well. So that would be my guess, is that it just was in part due to the soil type at Arlington. And again, if we, and that again highlights I guess the impact of the loss of these long-term trials, and the loss of the Lakeland site was in part due to funding limitations, but to have that additional counterpoint and comparison in there would have been really valuable to see because of the fact that obviously each of these sites are pretty unique and we're going to see different results depending on our soil type.
Yeah, we had another question about that too, because someone was thinking that organic matter should hold water better than conventional. So, but I guess that makes sense if the soil at that one site was so fertile.
Yeah, I think even the conventional performs pretty well.
Okay. When you're discussing conventional grain and other crops, are you comparing genetically modified seeds with conventional practices, or non-genetically modified seed with conventional practices?
The conventional treatments do have genetically modified seeds, so we don't have a comparison in there that is non-GM seed in a conventional treatment. It's kind of a third place of comparison, I guess. So there's, in the conventional system, it is the use of GM seed.
Okay. In wet springs, what about having winter cover crops prior to planting to suppress weeds with cover crops? Did you do that as well?
That hasn't been done, and that's another challenge, I think, of the long-term studies, is as we learn more or want to, the needs, I guess, to have consistency in the treatments from year to year, to learn about the long-term implications of that particular management style and the ability to layer on specific management in response to a particular year. So there wasn't a significant shift in management in response to the wet spring. In general, in Wisconsin, we recommend that any winter cover crop be tilled under about 3 weeks ahead of planting in order to prevent any insect issues on the emerging cash grain crop. But in terms of looking at using that, trying to lengthen that period of time in order to, I guess, try to suck up some of that extra soil moisture is what I'm assuming. There wasn't that layer of management on top of that.
Okay. Here's a question about whether you did any nutrient analyses of the crops to look at the quality as well as the quantity.
Of the crops themselves, I don't believe that there was. And again, this is something that, and part of my motivation for wanting to get this data out there is the loss of Dr. Posner and the wealth of data coming from this trial to make sure that it is brought forth to the organic community. So I'm not as familiar with the wealth of data that's been taken off of the site. There has been several investigators associated with UW doing research on here, and many graduate students. There is a website. WICST has a great website that has a lot of different publications, both peer-reviewed and also technical reports that detail a lot of this data in more specificity. And if you Google Wisconsin Integrated Cropping Systems Trial, you'll be able to find that website. And again, this have a wealth of technical reports as well as peer-reviewed research. I don't think that they've done any of those analyses, but I don't want to say with 100% certainty that's true, but I don't think that they've focused on that as an aspect of their research.
Yeah, maybe we can include that link to that website along with the recording and the slides on the
okay, that'd
webinar
be great,
registration
they have
page.
more the detailed data.
Okay, yeah, that would be great. So yeah, I'll put that up later on. Question about where you got the price data.
That's a good question. There's an economist that works closely with this project, and I'm not sure where one of the unique aspects of WICST, I guess, is that, again, they really, when they're doing all this economic data, use as try to put this in the perspective of a real-world situation as much as possible. But I'm not sure, and they do take they specify when the data has been collected in terms of the prices in the fall versus the winter, but I'm not sure if they're calling local elevators or where they're consistently getting their prices from and comparing where the organic and conventional prices are. I could definitely get that information, but I'm not positive. It may be some of that information may be detailed more in some of the technical reports that are available on the website.
Okay, here's a question about why only 2 years of N2O data are included, and also whether you're looking, I'm not sure if I understand this whole acronym, but the MSU KBS LTER results. Hopefully you know what that means.
Yeah.
You can explain that to everybody.
I think it has to do with I think it has to do with the grad students that have been put on and where the funding has come from. In the last several years, there's been an increasing number of graduate students that have been funded through various funding sources, including the Great Lakes Bioenergy Research Center and other initiatives that have focused more on the impact of agricultural systems on climate change. So some of that, again, may be just due to the profile of graduate students that are using WICST as a basis for their projects. And again, this is where the fact that I'm approaching this from more the interest on the organic data versus being integrated within the project itself. I know that Wisconsin does have a strong partnership with Michigan, particularly in terms of looking at biofuels. So I think there's definitely groups that are talking, and WICST is definitely also going through a transition point at this time, again, with the loss of Dr. Posner's leadership and looking at potentially new directions and new opportunities as UW and CALS continues a commitment to the project, but yet shifts the project and focus perhaps in some respects.
Okay, this question just wanted you to clarify that the organic farming system wasn't using cover crops, which would have dramatically reduced the fertilizer needs.
It wasn't, and that's something that I've spoken with and something that I think we will have serious discussions about going forward, because that has been something that I've noted is a market deficiency in the organic system, and is one of, I think, the impressive points that organic has, even without those cover crops, has performed as well as it has as compared to the conventional treatments. And looking at, again, we've collected this baseline worth of data off the organic treatments, but really we need to look at shifting that management to integrate what we know is more of the optimal organic system, which definitely looking at more strategically integrating cover crops is going to be key to that. So we'll be having those discussions as to how we might want to shift some of these rotation strategies, particularly in the organic systems, to respond to what we know is more of the best management practices for organic.
Okay, what fertilizer was used in organic corn and alfalfa?
There was a potassium input, and I'm not sure exactly what Janet and Josh decided for that. Otherwise, organic chicken compost, chicken manure compost was used.
Okay.
Which again may have not been the best input in terms of strategizing prices and availability.
Okay. Some people believe that a better way to examine environmental impact of organic or conventional systems is better understood relative to the amount of outputs instead of on an acre basis. This can change the result quite substantially, especially when you consider that often the yield disparity between the systems becomes greater as the yield levels increase. When you consider the amount of inputs required per output, then the conventional systems can be more efficient and waste less. What are your thoughts on this? Do you feel the Wisconsin results would look different and other research that you reference? you understood that question.
I guess I don't have enough experience with looking at those analyses in that particular way. And I have seen analyses done that way, but in terms of whether anyone's taken the WICST trial data and looked at that in that respect, I guess I unfortunately probably can't comment on that to the degree that would be needed to answer that question.
Okay. Did the loss of yield from the extreme weather events change the comparison of the gross margins that showed organic production outperforming conventional?
With the
the question refers to the
the
loss
data,
of...
I haven't seen the data.
Okay, this is just referring to the loss of yield due to the weed pressure from the wet spring.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it may, if it's looking like it's bringing it down to about 3/4 of the conventional, 70, but more like 75%. I'd have to look back at the data and see how much of a yield premium was offered by the organic premiums. It looks like, particularly at the Arlington site, that the organic premium would have still allowed for enough to even make up for the yield decline caused by the wet springs, but not having those particular numbers in front of me to make a calculation, I can't say with 100% certainty.
Okay, the net return didn't account for land costs because you have no land costs. Is that correct?
Again, this is where I unfortunately, as someone reporting the numbers and not being involved in the analyses, would have to refer back to the specific technical reports on the website. Again, I know that they are trying to mirror what the growers, how the growers would be considering the prices, and in terms of whether they incorporate the fact that land costs in Wisconsin have increased significantly in recent years, I'm not 100% sure.
Okay, here's a general question. Does your research support the promotion of organic agriculture as a more resilient system of production in the face of climate change?
I think again, this highlights the need for more longer-term data and also incorporating some of the multi-strategy approaches that we're learning more from various research studies may have complementary effects, I guess. I think it counters some of the criticism that organic, particularly due to the reliance on mechanical cultivation, is having a markedly negative impact on some of the indicators of sustainability, such as soil organic carbon and also soil loss. But in terms of showing it being a more resilient system, I can't say that the data necessarily indicates that, but again, this is just looking at a slice on our Arlington soils with the rotation that was chosen 10 years ago and continued over the past several years. So I don't think necessarily we can make a conclusion, a broad conclusion off of this, but really using this to add to the greater body of knowledge coming from other long-term cropping systems trials, and seeing how that fits into more of the bigger picture that's looking over different environments and different soil conditions and different approaches to organic management.
Okay, was the corn and soybean seed price increase due to it being transgenic seed?
In the conventional, yes.
Okay. Let's see. I'm going back a little bit because I just checked to make sure there aren't other questions here. Oh yeah, here's a good one. Why isn't everyone organic given the profitability?
That's a that's a good question. I think that, and this is, I'm curious to see more of what the numbers are, because there is some numbers that the RMA recently collected that I know are quite controversial to the organic community, looking at organic yields and how that, from on a farm basis, how those differ from conventional. I think, organic is a challenging system, and I think that when conventional grain prices are as high as they are, and conventional producers are able to use custom operators and to not have to worry so much about responding to weed issues, and I think for overall, it's organic is can be a challenging system. I think that organic producers that are in it usually find it rewarding and are committed to it, but it's still it's a different mindset that I think is still not for everyone. How these numbers would change depending on supply, obviously dynamics of supply and demand, and how that would shake out in the long term, I can't say, but I still think that it's definitely a change in mindset, that even seeing the organic premiums, not every conventional producer is going to want to engage in the practices necessary to manage an organic farm well, and also go through the certification process and the record keeping and all the other aspects of organic management that differ from conventional.
We just got a comment submitted that if everyone were organic, the premium would go down.
Yeah.
So we have time for one more question. We have someone wondering whether you're doing any on-farm research trials or just using these sites.
In terms of looking at the consistent kind of baseline data that is collected as part of the long-term cropping systems trial, there isn't a similar trial that's done on a farm, and there's not continual like archived soil samples and such that's taken on a farm, and that would be interesting. We're going to be collecting some of that data off of a variety of organic dairy pastures over the next 2 years, but looking at different lengths of management, but that is really quite a different approach than looking at this long-term trial data. And I'm not sure if I know of any. I'd be interested in knowing if there's any research program that has a counterpart on more of a working organic farm. Or we do have here at UW a program that does a lot of research on working farms, but I don't know if they have any. I don't think they have any organic farms as part of that portfolio. But short answer is no.
Okay. Well, we're running out of time, so I'd like to thank everyone